Why AI transformations fail without outcome ownerships? AI programs don't fail because teams lack effort. They fail because nobody owns the outcomes when the pressure builds or hits. Budgets tighten, priorities shift, and transformation turns into a slide deck. In that moment, the real test simply is who has the decision rights, the measures, and the accountability to land business results. Why this matters in 2027 towards boards proof wants proof, not activity. Regulations and customers want control, resilience, and audit ready evidence. Leaders are forced to connect AI to operating models, risk postures, and measurable value in one line straight. Ganesh sits at the intersection of technology, cyber assurance, strategy, governance, and growth outcomes. He's lived the hard part, turning executive intent into ownership, cadence, results at scale. Technology enables outcomes, cybersecurity protects it, growth proves ROI, strategy governs decisions. Before we dive into the topic, let's have a small video. Let's welcome Ganesh to Power of Knowing Forum's podcast series and dive into the topic. Hi, Mr. Ganesh. Welcome to our podcast. How are you today, sir?
I'm fine. Good evening to you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Good evening, sir. Sir, a small intro about your journey, about yourself to the audience, sir.
Yes, I've been in business and working for about 35 years now. I've had my background in financial services. I was working for an American bank for about 25 years, briefly in India, but then in the Middle East and then in the UK. So I was managing a lot of for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. My responsibilities there were to manage technology and operations. So technology being a core, but then I branched out into operations as well. And then I joined the company I'm working for today, which is Manpower Group. And today I'm managing all of the technology and information systems as the chief information officer of the entire company, as well as the chief transformation officer, which is a position that I took earlier part of last year. And in this uh, uh, kind of position, I kind of manage our entire worldwide technology operations. We are there in about 80 plus countries. Manpower Group, just for the viewers to know, is a $20 billion company which specializes in workforce solutions, staffing, HR solutions, and such like. And we are very geographically diversified. Though we're a US based company, we have extensive operations in Europe, in Asia, in Latin America, and of course, the US too. And as part of transformation, my job is to ensure that I utilize the various techniques, process excellence, as well as technology enabled transformation as key themes to create value. Unlocking human potential and creating value are the key things. So that's what I do now, and very happy to be on the show.
Thank you for that, Mr. Ganesh. I'll dive into the first pointer that I want to understand from you on when did you first realize AI progress and business outcomes were drifting apart?
This world of AI is somewhat new to us, especially the generative AI part, and it burst into our consciousness about 3 or 4 years back with the release of ChatGPT, and then it became very popular. Even earlier to that, when we were using machine learning and such like, it was very clear that when you introduce AI as a nice gimmick or for something to do a proof of concepts, um, or in peripheral areas with interesting use cases but not really impactful, it was very rapidly apparent to me and to other members of our leadership that no matter if you have success in these smaller initiatives or proof of concepts, it does not have any material impact to the company. It does not materially change the cost or revenue or stakeholder experiences like customer experiences. And therefore, it becomes only a peripheral player. So it's often that we have a lot of buzz around AI, and that's true for a lot of viewers who are listening to this podcast. But ultimately, it does not translate materially into impact, and that is where we are today. And that is the reason I suggested that this topic about AI and outcomes is an important theme to discover. And I've seen a lot of programs where we were not clear on the objectives. And if you're not clear on the outcomes, don't start the program. Don't start it because you want to play around with AI. Don't start it because the board tells you that you need to do AI or your CEO says that you want to do AI. Focus on what you want to achieve and then figure out what are the enabling factors.
Sir, you touched upon a very important point where you say everybody is running to have AI implemented in their organization, and the boards also are saying, let's try AI and see how it takes up. And you said when you are not clear, I think that's the point that we should really look at whether AI is needed for our kind of an environment. And that is very important to take a decision because everybody is running to AI. We also don't need to run to AI, and many of the processes are not required to be AI enabled stuff because as you rightly said also AI needs a lot of investment, a lot of planning to be done before it gets implemented, and the scope is one thing that is not clear at the immediate basis and the board wants to adopt it. We should slow down, and that's where you are saying that pointer where AI is not for everybody to jump in and run a trial run, right? So that's a very important point at the start of the session only, which you are making up. Now, what is your definition of an AI outcome that board will accept? This is revenue, cost, risk, CX, or productivity. How do you look at this point of view?
Yeah, just continuing from the earlier thought and your thoughts as well, Prem. It's kind of erroneous to have a separate strategy called an AI strategy. There is
Yeah.
only a business strategy, and everything is subservient to that. So anything that you need to do needs to serve the business strategy, and that doesn't change because of the introduction of AI. I look at AI as a very powerful enabler, which has tremendous amount of potential, but it's still an enabler. It's not
Mm.
something which lives on its own and it has a separate kind of role in an organization other than to serve its overall objectives. And so the business strategy is all about, depends on the board and the CEO and the leadership team. What is it that they want to do? Who are their customers? How do they derive? How do they provide value? How do they do it at the best cost? How do they maintain quality? How do they look at new markets? How do they develop new products? So that's all part of what they're doing, and that's the value they provide. And to the extent that AI can help derive better value, we should use it. And that's why I say that start with the end in mind, then work your way backwards. And the other point, Prem, you said is that AI is not a tool for everything. It
Yeah.
doesn't, you don't need to be forced to use AI because somebody's telling you to. You need to look at the use cases, you need to look at the outcomes, and then examine clearly if AI is required. And I would go so far as to say you should use AI only after you exhaust all other possibilities which are already available. We have a variety of different tools and platforms and software available. First, exhaust them before you jump into AI, because AI has its own kind of risks, and we may not have the maturity in organizations to adopt it at pace.
Sir, you rightly said again the pointers that you are saying is it is it has to have an end in mind and a start also to where we begin and what to be beginning with. So I think that's a very important model. Whether the strategy and the point that you said is people are talking strategy for everything. There should be one strategy, is what you said, and that's perfectly aligning. Whether you bring a tool, a new technology, or a new structure, or a new practice that you want to be, the strategy still remains the same, but you will diversify into those pieces of work that you need to put strategy into, right? And that's a very important point. Now, how do you assign a decision rights using RACI and a value stream owner model so that delivery does not outrun adoptions? Your take on it, sir.
Yeah. No, it's a great question because we've had use cases, we had solutions, including using AI, where we had some really dramatic improvements and very new and great capabilities. But when you have these new capabilities, the most important thing is that people need to use it. And
Yeah.
often, what happens is when you drop a specific atomic capability, which is part of a much larger process, which spans multiple people, multiple departments, that just because that capability is better than what is there today, it doesn't mean it gets adopted. There are many reasons why adoption does not happen. A, because change management has not been great. People don't understand it, they're not trained on it, and so they feel uncomfortable. The initial time when you drop something new, it doesn't work really well, and somebody needs to take feedback and quickly improve. And most importantly, uh, people may feel that, especially with AI, part of their jobs are being taken away. So there is hesitation. So there are power structure dynamics that are also in play. So many reasons why adoption doesn't happen. And people see, generally what happens is we talk about change and we say everybody should change except us. So when it comes to myself, I feel reluctant to change, but I think everybody should change. And that's true. Whenever change is there, it is difficult for human beings to adapt to change rapidly. It takes time and effort. You need to rewire your neurons, rewire your brain to feel comfortable with doing things differently. And that's why, despite new capabilities, new solutions, including those powered by AI, you need to take a lot of time and effort to really understand how to do change management and adoption. And the core of that, in my view, in most cases, is you need to understand the process that is supporting the solution. And you need to thoughtfully rewire this process, replan this process, along with the people who are involved in the process. So they need to be there. I mean, they need to be part of the solution. And you don't, do everything in the head office and suddenly throw a solution at them, because that rarely works.
Right, sir. What you are saying is also again very important when you look at the adoption, right? So you need to improve what is there already in a slow manner, bring those adoption to the tools that are there, which we can use, is what you are saying. I think what you are saying, if nobody wants the outcome, everyone wants the excuse. I think that's a bigger statement that we want to make when the AI adoption is into consideration in every level of the organization, right? So my next question: what are the three top leading indicators you track, not lagging, to detect drift early?
Another really great question. So, as I said, some of those we covered, but I just want to, say that again because these are so important. So, first is, if you want to ensure that execution doesn't outrun adoption and there's no drift, first start with outcomes. Be very clear that as a team you agree on the business outcomes, not technology outcomes, not AI outcomes, business outcomes. And the project needs to be designed with business outcomes in mind. And this is very easy to say, but very difficult, because most people implementing programs and projects basically start with by saying the outcome is the program should be successful or the project should be successful. That's not really true. You need the outcome to be delivered. It can be a business metric. It could be higher sales, higher revenue, better cross sell, lower cost, or maybe a process outcome where the cycle time reduces. So fix that very clearly. Then everybody is aligned, and then people have a clear north star that they're working towards. So that's a very good leading indicator. And the second thing is that when you're going through the program, keep checking at all times that we are still aligned to what we want to do. Because often in large programs, we start diluting it. We say, oh, you know what, we can't do all of it. It's too expensive. It takes too much time. Or with an AI solution, we really don't know how to do it. You start diluting it. and then you come up with something which is half baked. And there are many reasons why people go with half baked, and then it really doesn't, the adoption does not come because of that. So those two to me are extremely important. And of course, the other project management tools where you monitor the project, ensure that the risks are managed, and those are traditional ways to ensure that your execution of the change is being done really well. And the third thing I would say is invest in change management. Now, most organizations don't have expertise in change management because that's not something that they develop. They develop subject matter expertise, and they have traditional expertise in the various functions of the organization like finance, IT, cybersecurity, and marketing and sales and engineering and so on. But there's nothing called change management because people don't pay attention to it. Especially with AI, change management becomes extremely important. And that is another way to ensure that you don't have a drift and you ensure that you plan for change ahead of time.
Sir, you said one point again. I think the pointers that you are pushing out is making me ask so many good pointers that I had in mind, which I didn't get answers at many other points. Now, what you said is change management. I think that's one big thing that is missed in most of the projects that we see off late, right? So there's a need. You brings a tool. You don't look at the change. You just say, let's do it a test run, and once the test run is done, you don't get into a thing that most of the things fail, because when they move to the production, there is a lot of change that happens when you are using the real data and the test data, right? So AI needs data. I mean, it fuels on data only. And that pointer of change management, whether you want to add it to the real data or the production data, is one cause, and you'll have to have due diligence done on it. So which I think is a lot big thing which is missing, right? And with that, what metric familiarizes matter mostly, like Dora metrics or cycle time, adoption, quality, incident risk, or cost to service, right? So that's one thing that has to be looked at from a change management perspective also. Your take on it, sir?
Another good question. It's basically how you metricize this. So, as you launch these AI based programs, how are you able to measure progress? That's the
Mm,
key question. And of course, there are software engineering techniques like the Dora metrics being an example, which you can use to measure the progress of your development, which are, in my view, what I call lower order metrics. So there are, you have cascading metrics. At the top of the house are metrics around, what is the goal, what is the outcome, and then how close you are to that. And then the second is your change, adoption, and training of people and allowing them to understand why they are doing it. And then the third is as you're developing and you're putting in AI, then you have a number of metrics which allow you to understand how quickly you're doing things, how efficiently you're doing, how many iterations you have. If you're using Agile, it does every kind of Scrum, ensure that you're progressing. So those are standard metrics that we will utilize. And even if you're using AI, you use the same standard engineering metrics that you're always used to. I don't think we should throw it out of the thing. The point about AI is that data becomes extremely important. And the AI platforms and systems have a very different kind of behavior from traditional platforms. The biggest difference between the two is that AI is generally probabilistic. Especially the current version of AI, which is generative AI, is probabilistic. It means that it can provide the right answer one day and it can change the answer the next day because it's not deterministic. Whereas all the systems that we've been used to, and all of the viewers who are, I'm guessing, IT professionals of various kinds, they're used to deterministic system. And even if I'm saying this, for people to make that connection is difficult because you always think that if you test it, it works well, it should work well in production. Not true at all.
not true at
The very same use case which has worked for you in your UAT may not work the same way in production when confronted it because models can hallucinate. So the design of AI systems is fundamentally very different from the design of the normal deterministic systems. You need to have perhaps champion challenger. You need to have a human in the loop. You need to be able to design the process in a different way. And it needs multiple people to collaborate. So the traditional way is that you take a requirement and you convert it into a platform or a code and then deliver it really does not work. So you need other metrics to figure out how to assess the reliability and assurance of these systems.
Sir, again, I'll take one more pointer here when you said, right, the matrices, the data that you use it in the UAT environment. I'm from the banking domain where I did a lot of projects when I was part of Wipro, right? And I've did banking projects across the globe, okay? The challenge was that only. So when you said UAT production, we used to test lot of data in the UAT, but we never had a live bank connected to a UAT system. We used to do all the testing that used to be done, and once we move those into production and see, there was a huge difference in the kind of data that it takes, the kind of paths it has to roll out, and the kind of OLTP operations that it has to cater to. So that point resonates so well, saying that we can do lot of simulation, do lot of challenge work on the UAT platform, but productions should be treated production grade systems only, and that kind of a data has to be done when you see the real impact, when you look at that kind of an enterprise solution going into the large systems that are coming in, right? So I think that's a very important point people should understand, where UAT is a different small subset, whereas production is enterprise grade system that we are providing to the customer to serve, right? So that's a very clear demarcation that they should have, whether it is implementation of AI, implementation of a tool of some sort. Also, this is a very key important point. So, what do you think about this point, sir? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah. So no, it's a good point that you make that UAT systems are always the lower environments and they don't have the representative data or data for many reasons. They have dated data. I mean, it's like 1 year old, and you have
Okay.
a smaller set. However, for AI models, whether it's for machine learning models or generative AI models, you do need a lot of data. And I would really advise practitioners to see how they can curate, assemble high quality data. You don't need PII data. You can redact and edit it away. I know there are many, regulatory regimes where PII data need to be handled sensitively, but you don't need to bring them to the lower tier environment. Take out the PII, but the rest of the data, 100% best option. Bring it into the lower environment. Ensure that it's fairly clean and well ordered, because
Yeah.
that is really important for you to train the models. If you don't have it, you cannot train the models. It's not like the existing systems where you can manage to develop a full-fledged platform or system with partial data. That does not work
Yeah.
in the world of AI. So it's important that you do that, and then you can, then test it out in a proper representative environment before promoting it into production environments.
Uh, Great point, sir. Now, what we are saying is matrices do not create value; they expose who is accountable. Is what we are saying in as many words that we are saying. Now, what is the minimal viable governance for AI programs? Cadence, forms, approval, or exceptional paths?
Great question. So I told you earlier that I kind of referred to something that most organizations do not have. They're not built AI governance enough. So it's emerging. Maybe some of the most sophisticated organizations may have, but most organizations of big and small have not evolved their AI governance because it's quite new to everybody. And I can't tell you how important it is for you to have multiple levels of governance, standards, policies, and engineering platforms before you deploy AI. If you don't have these, properly done, then you're exposing an organization to significant risk. It's all nice to bring together a very quick AI platform, because one thing about AI platforms is they can be developed fairly rapidly because AI can develop AI. So you can utilize AI tools and code writers and so on to develop AI platforms fairly rapidly. But the fact is, if you don't have proper governance, they're exceedingly risky. I'll give you a couple of examples of the governance that you need to have. You certainly need to have detailed standards and policies. You can take best practices and bring them into your organization and customize it, but you should definitely have it. You should have, for example, engineering standards could mean, these are the kind of LLMs that we will use. We will not run these models in an environment outside of our company. We'd like to run it internally because it's very sensitive. Or you might say that if you want to instrument, the cost of AI, you need to figure out how much it costs. You need to have a tool to be able to understand the cost. Or you may have red teaming, where you actually do a kind of an ethical hack of an AI system and trying to beat it by red teaming it. So these are all things that you might also have artifacts or platforms which abstract away a lot of the work required. For example, you can have a router which allows you to route between multiple LLMs. You don't need the model, or the platform does not need to choose which router. You can leave that to the infrastructure to choose. So if you develop all this very sensibly, then and one more thing before I forget. Unlike in the past, when the external vendor upgrades their LLM, let's say you're using an open source model, Llama, or you're using a closed source model, OpenAI, they go through frequent upgrades. Every 6 months is an upgrade. When that upgrade happens, your model that you built and your platform that you built may not work the same way. It's often the case that for the very same kind of situation in production, it gives you a different answer, which means you need to have the ability to rapidly test out hundreds and thousands of use cases in an automated fashion the minute the new model comes in. And sometimes people deprecate the old model very rapidly. So you don't have a choice. You're stuck in the middle. So if you don't have all of these well laid out in your organization, introducing AI into mission critical processes is very risky. So first get that sorted out before you get into putting AI.
What we are saying is you need to have the proper policies, you need to have the proper guidelines based on, with that pointers, how do we align with the NIST AI RMF and ISO 42000 frameworks without creating paperwork theater? Because when you talk about frameworks and compliances, there's a lot of paperwork which comes in, and we don't want to create that because we are going with AI and we don't want to have more paperwork. So how do you look at this point?
It's a great question. So the point is that you don't want to make it so bureaucratic and so difficult that you stifle innovation. So you need to allow, teams to innovate, rapidly deploy, test out, and learn from experience. Organizations and teams learn from experience. If you don't allow them to have experience, then they'll never learn. You won't build those muscles in the organization. At the same time, if you're going to deploy stuff into production, and especially these are very critical, is part of your core value chain, then you have to be extremely careful too. So I think, my suggestion is that your teams and your organization needs to define what is your risk appetite. That's very important. Work backwards from the risk appetite and then be pragmatic about what are the standards and policies that you would put together. Today, thankfully, we are evolving at such a rapid pace that you have common frameworks and standards, such as the NIST framework that you talked about. You can take the best practices from this, but don't take it blindly and apply all of it. It's just too heavy for any organization. Take one or two critical areas which are important to manage your risk, implement it, and then learn over time. And as you become mature, your standards and policies can also become more and more mature. Also, there are AI governance tools which are available. They're third party, you can buy them, and they do the entire AI orchestration and governance for you. And they encapsulate best practices already into them. You don't need to think about it, it's already there. And then you can also tweak it. They're parameterized, so you don't need to have every single policy and every single standard imposed on you. You can pick and choose a few. So take the help of other people's experience through either platform, software, or standards, customize it for your organization and apply it, taking care that you don't stifle innovation and speed while still allowing reasonable levels of security and safeguard.
So what we are saying is, uh, it is it has to be a two-level speed model, fast lanes, low risk, okay, and use case based gated lanes for high risk. Mentioned in model inventory is what we are talking about, and audit approvals of evidence is also what we are talking about. I think that's a very important point, that governance is not a control, it is clarity under pressure is what we want to bring it up. And the next point that I want to look at is, how do you place security gates in AI life cycle, okay, and data training, deployment, or development for then monitoring. So to reduce rework, because as you rightly said, today what it works, tomorrow it does not work, and these models keep changing. So how do we keep that consistency, and how do we have that security gates implemented? Is my point that I want to understand from you, sir.
Yeah, another great question. So, as I said, I mean, part of it is in the development process where you do security by design and by default and not do it later. You can't have a gate at the end of the process to say, let me check what you guys have done and then let me suggest what you need to do. Do it from day one. So involve your security teams as part of your development effort so that they are fully there from day one. And the principles, standards, and such like ensure that you build it from day one. So that gives you a huge plus point. However, in the case of AI, that's not good enough because even if you deploy it to production, you need to keep continuously monitoring it. You need to monitor it for many things. First is whether there's any data leakage, whether there's a possibility of red teaming. So you need to constantly try to break what you built. Like we do an ethical hack or a red team once a year. You need to do it for your AI environments, your AI platforms and solutions too. It's important. And then the other point I would suggest is that as you're doing all of these solutions, you must have a human in the loop, and you need to ensure that you sample. You can't sample 100% of what AI does. Then there's no point in putting the solution to automate something. But you need to have sampling of some order, and you can sample based on value or risk, or just take a random sample and then ensure that you validate and check the outcomes and outputs on an ongoing basis. It never ends. You can't say, I'm going to do the sampling for 3 months and give it up because the system works well. As I told you, AI is probabilistic, so it can keep changing its color. So you need to do the sampling forever, and that's part of the human in the loop effort you need to do. The final thing is you can also have, as I said, champion challenger, where you have two models who are adversaries and they actually challenge each other. So that means that these two models have different logic, they could have different LLMs behind them, and they can arrive at the same result and challenge each other. And there could be a judge, a model which actually judges which is better. These and one more way is for the AI models to assign a confidence score. So AI models are able to introspect and understand their own process and provide a confidence score. So that way we know when the human in the loop needs to be brought in. So I guess with these, you can significantly improve the reliability and security of the platform. One more item which comes to my mind is explainability. One is internally, but also in certain jurisdictions like EU and some of the Western countries, explainability of the model becomes very important, especially if the model is high risk, meaning that it makes decisions about people. It makes decisions about the hiring decisions, or maybe in the criminal or legal system there are decisions made. These are very high risk decisions about people, which means one needs to explain why the decision was taken, and the entire audit trail of explainability must be available. And if somebody inspects it, it should be logically proved that this is why we did it. You cannot have a black box model. It has to be a white box model where this is laid out very clearly, and that must be part of the design. You can't then, once you develop everything, you can't then decide, oh my god, I need to audit it. Auditing has to be part of the day one parts of design.
Right, so what we are saying is, you should also look at continuous auditability of whatever we are implementing, and it cannot be an annual task or a quarterly task where we do audit and then we find something which is not done rightly and then go fix it, because it becomes very expensive when you do that such kind of things, right? So now, with that, what I want to understand is how does, or how do you uh, control. So when we talk about controls, which controls do you insist? Like, there are a lot of controls that we are talking about today: is zero trust, least privilege, secrets management, model access logging, and CIA plus integrity for output. So what is your take on those pointers?
All of these have their place in various situations, use cases, and organizational risk profiles. But there's one point that you talked about, which I didn't mention earlier, which I think you rightly brought about, which is least privilege. I can't emphasize how important it is for you to ensure that agents, AI agents, have the concept of least privilege built in. There are two aspects to it. One is, it is my view that when you set up an AI agent to do a task, don't think as a software, platform which does a certain automation. Think of it as a kind of a human being or a persona, like an employee of yours who is given a particular role to do. And the reason why I say that is that once you make the agent a persona, then you're able to implement the least privilege in a proper way. Because you would say this particular person is behaving like an accounting person. He or she, if they had been a human being, they would be an accountant or a person who does financial entries or something like that. And therefore, that is a persona, and that is the privileges we would provide to this person. And even if the AI agent were to hallucinate and do something completely wrong, it cannot go beyond that boundary. Even so, earlier today I was talking to somebody and in my team, and he was saying that we have had examples with least privileges. The agent decided to delete all the records on the system, and it can delete it screen by screen. I mean, just imagine there's a call center employee who has the ability to flip through customer records. They have the ability to mark a customer record inactive. Uh, but they do it, once in a way when there is a real need. What if the agent decides, I want to start all over again. I have a million records. Let me systematically scan through all the million, one step at a time. In about 10 days, I finish deactivating the whole database. It's possible, and it has happened. So the point here is that even if you clothe it with the human persona and the user ID, even then you probably want to restrict it to the least set of privileges, because that is one more safeguard that you have. So all of this I'm saying is that let's not just rush in to put AI agents and AI solution just into production, all of this, because we will learn to our tremendous negative impact that it can have multiple scenarios that could go wrong.
Sir, very important point where you said AI having that least privilege where data. I think there was a recent case which one of the tool, I think, deleted some 280 million records, and that went to a big mess, right? So I'm not sure the real case study about it or the real facts about it, but there was something that it deleted all the AI workflows and the whole system was in a mess. So that's what I understand. Now, what we are also saying to the audience is that AI is not theoretical when it hits customers at scale, is what we want to be very clearly saying as a message, because you can bring AI as a tool, but really look at what you are giving as an access, and that is very clearly coming out from Mr. Ganesh Ramakrishnan saying that it has to be looked at least privileges. Zero trust is one more tool that is there where you trust nothing but give importance of the data of the customers is what we are trying to give as an input here. Now, how do you decide whether data can be used and what must be blocked under DPDP India and GDPR style principles?
Yeah, I think my suggestion to companies is there are lots of regulations in different countries, and they all vary. The easiest way is to take the most comprehensive regulation, which normally tends to be the EU. The EU tends to have the most maturity in passing regulations. Use that as a at the base, and then you'll automatically comply to any geography, most likely. And most of what EU says is that your controls need to be commensurate with the risk. So if your AI models are high risk, and I gave some examples earlier of high risk, then you need to take a lot more, safeguards. You need to have explainability. In general, most regulations will ensure that you don't use PII data, personally identifiable information. So things like name, address, IDs, and so on, should not be used in models. And it's not just about using it to make models. When you're in the area of generative AI, remember that it gets even trained on this information, and it can unwittingly share this information. If somebody is able to break it or even ask innocent questions, it can, share or reveal this information, which could be very, very damaging. Just imagine if you have a customer support chatbot, which is open to customers and they can ask questions. What if it decides to share, sensitive internal employee details? So I think it's important that you ensure that your access to data is controlled. At the very minimum, you do that. The other point is that when you're training models or providing information, ensure that internal sensitive information is also not shared. You could have M&A information, you could have sensitive financial information, you could have forecasting information, you could have product information, which is intellectual property, patentable information, research. So you need to be very careful about what you feed in, because there's a tendency to kind of take all the data and give it. Like you talked about the principle of least privileges, we should also have the principle of the least data, meaning just provide the data which is absolutely essential, and don't kind of increase the envelope just like that.
What we are saying is you should be very careful in what you are doing is the basic thing that we are talking about. And sir, what practical pattern works? Data classification, consent mapping, retention, and purpose limitation built into pipelines. What does practically pattern works?
All of what you said are accepted mature techniques, and these are all things which have existed before AI. Even when you use data for other purposes, or even for the earlier avatars of AI, which is machine learning and so on, all of these were there. And I think each one, as I said, has a role to play. I the traditional way to do things is to ensure the data is labeled, which means if an organization have massive amounts of data, you label it as how sensitive it is, whether it's confidential or it's publicly available, and then ensure that using that labeling, you're able to understand what data can be fed into various situations and models, and that way automatically you limit the end use of the data because you adequately labeled it.
Got it, sir. Now, coming to the next point that I want to ask is what operating model shifts shift is required to make AI beneficial, durable, product teams, platform teams, owners. What do you think on this point, sir?
So this is, I mean, very dear to my heart, and I'll kind of echo where I started from. If you want to ensure that you're successful, I think one of the major kind of opportunities of AI, especially agentic AI, is to revolutionize processes. And that's a strange thing to say, because everybody would talk about having new products, better sales, better marketing, better engineering. But I think what has been overlooked and not probably given importance is process excellence as a competitive differentiator. So today we have the ability, especially with agentic AI, to completely revolutionize the way we process things. And if you think about most of what we do within companies and organizations, we have lots of internal processes which are fairly complex, which span across multiple teams and departments, ultimately to deliver value to the customer. And that's so we are dominated by different kinds of process, and they're all interlinked. If you're able to understand these very well, and many of them have been practiced for a long time, most organizations have been at it for many years. These processes have evolved over many years, and they've kind of acquired a rock like solidity. If you're able to open it up, open the hood, and without any preconditions, look at the best practices and best processes, you can get massive and significant improvements because agentic AI allows you to do a lot of stuff which thus far was not possible, especially those involving knowledge processing, judgment, human like work. It can do. And this is going to increase more and more. And organizations which are able to get to this and have the courage and the ability to look at this are the ones which will create tremendous differentiation. So I think it's an invitation to everybody to think about this and how they can do this within their organizations.
Sir, one last question that I have is to look at. Then we'll look at some of the comments which have come in before we conclude. Sir, how do you use COBIT or ITL practices to define ownership for services changes and controls without slowing innovation?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're talking about AI, but I think COBIT and so on are highly mature frameworks, and they've stood the test of time. I know they keep getting upgraded over time, but the core principles of COBIT sustain whether you have AI or no AI. And these are very complex, frameworks which you cannot take wholesale and apply it. But as we talked before, parts of them relating to your maturity and amenable to implementation needs to be taken and implemented. And there's no point in putting a standard or policy which is far ahead. So you have maturity models and you have frameworks. You can measure yourself where you're situated, and you advance slowly over time. This is not something that you can do overnight. So, and I'm sure all of you and all the viewers would have the ability to understand where they are situated. There are frameworks to even measure your maturity levels. I mean, there are scores and ratings that are provided. So use this to advance over time. And there is no fun in having the highest score. Your score should reflect your organization's risk appetite. With the financial services, you aim for a very high one. But if you're, manufacturing, maybe a slightly lower one is perfectly fine. Because remember, control also has a cost. So you have to expend cost if you want to keep progressing on that scale. So you need to understand where you want to be.
With this, I think we are at the fag end of time. I have few comments which have come in. I'm just bringing them to the screen. Give me a second, sir. I'll bring them to the screen. Yeah. This is the first question that I have from Akhtar. What controls required if AI leak of PII data?
Well, I hope that we don't get into this because you don't even provide PII data to AI. Not in the model, not in the training, and hopefully not even in access. So if you allow AI to access PII data, then you have this risk that they could leak. So those are controls you need to do. But if you have the situation that your workflow requires a human-like persona and they look at screens and access information, then you need to keep testing it out to ensure that this leakage does not happen. And that's why I said continuous monitoring and continuous auditing is a prerequisite.
So there was a glitch. Sorry, sorry about it. There's another question which has come. It is well understood that tech decisions required to be driven by fit for purpose versus best in class aligned with business strategy. How do we arrive at the right solution when Leading indicators are shown speed of delivery has become the order of qualify. So this is the point that
Yeah. So I would just reframe this. So paraphrasing the question, you know, uh, would you use fit for purpose? Would you do best in class, or somewhere in the middle when designing solutions? And I think that it depends on your organization's culture, but it ought to be driven by what you want to achieve. And in the case of AI solutions in particular, I think start small. Don't aim for the best. Aim for something in the middle. Start small, deliver part of the outcome, and then evolve and mature it. On day one, you don't need to be perfect because you like spend too much money. And if things don't work out or if fails, all the money is gone. So fit for purpose is good to start with and then move to best in class.
so thank you for that, sir. I'll just summarize on whatever pointers that we have discussed over the last 40 minutes. Outcome ownership is a role, not a slogan, is what we said, and uh, assign decision rights, measure, and the benefits of cadence from day one is what we said as many times when we started. You want to implement a program, you will have to look at cadence, what kind of privileges, what kind of access is to be given. So that is the first point. Use a small set, which I think you mentioned in 3 4 questions that we had. Use a small set leading to indicators of dora metrics, adoption, quality, risk signals, and unit cost to catch up the early drift is what we said. And the governance should be lightweighted but audit ready, because you cannot have annual cycles audit, you will have to have continuous audit is what we spoke also. Aligned to those frameworks like NIST's AI RMF, ISO 45 or 42001, with clear fast lane and gated lane processes that are defined, right? So that is the third point. That and security and privacy are outcome enablers. Zero trust, NIST thinking, DPDP, GDPR principles, and evidence driven by design is what we want to look at when we implement any system, is what we wanted to look at. Growth comes from unit economics and adoption, not model demos. FinOps and TBB transparency keep scale rationally. This is the pointers that I had noted based on what you have spoken, sir. Any final pointers before we close the session, sir?
No, nothing at all. But thank you for the time. But if there's only one point I would like to leave the viewers is that start with the end in mind. Don't think about an AI strategy. Make it subservient to business strategy, and don't rush to use AI tools just like that. Exhaust the other alternatives before jumping into AI. All the best for your AI journey. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us. To the audience, we have streamed this podcast live to LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Do let us know if there are any comments that are there. We will give the answers on the comments of these questions. Sir, thank you for joining, and it's been a great honor to have you today part of our podcast, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care.